Okay, a very good morning, class. So, today we are starting a new chapter, that is the second chapter of biology. After a very long time, we have started our biology class. So, let me remind you what we have done in the previous class. We completed the various life processes that were including all the systems in our body, that were the digestive system, then the respiration, the photosynthesis, and it also included some other systems like nervous system and the excretory system. So the nervous system. So this chapter, the control and coordination, is related with the nervous system. As we all know, our brain is the master organ of the body and it regulates our all the activities. So how does it regulate our complete body activities? That is by control and coordination. The control and coordination between the brain and the body. If this coordination is lost, then there is said to be any mental problem. So therefore the sound condition of the brain is very much important for the proper functioning of our body. So in the this chapter we'll talk about that. So there are some examples given in the book. This is your NCRT. So whenever a seed germinates and grows, and we can see that the seedling moves over the course of a few days. That is, after some time, the seed, when it is sown into the ground, it is called a seedling. So we can see after some time it starts to show movement. That is, it start to form the plumule with and radicle. The plumule on further maturation gives rise to the stem, and the radicle gives rise to the root. So all these movements are due to some secretions as well as some hormones and some activities that are going inside the seed. Same way animals also, like you can see a cat running, children playing on swings, and all these movements, they are all connected with the growth, and all these things, all the movements are indirectly or directly connected with our brain. So now we'll talk why these movement are not caused by the growth. So why do we associate such visible movements with life? This is the question now. So what can be the possible answer for this is that we think of movement as a response to a change in the environment of the organism. So the cat may be running because it has seen a mouse. So this can be one of the reason why the cat is running from one place to another. Maybe the cat has seen the mouse. Or not only that, we also think of the movement as an attempt by the living organism to use changes in their environment to their advantage. That is, most of the birds, like the Siberian birds, they move in the extreme winter conditions. They move to some hot places. So that is because so that they can survive easily. So movement is not only for protecting themselves; it is also can be done for surviving in better place, like better habitat that is well suited for them. Like plants grow out in sunshine. There are some plants like the sunflower. It shows movement, that is the photonastic movement. What is photonastic movement? We'll talk about it later, but me give you a little brief about it. The photonastic movement is a movement by the sunflower that it turns towards the sunlight whenever the sun is first rising into the sky. So this is also called as a photonastic movement. The word photo is used for the sunlight that is coming from the sun. Now some other examples are also given. These all you can read on your own. So now we'll come to actual thing which we have to start, the nervous system. So first of all we talk about animals and then we'll come to the plants. So the nervous coordination in animals. So in animals there are two kinds of coordination. uh, this is the topic we'll study today. So in animals, two kinds of coordination are present: the nervous and chemical. So the nervous coordination is brought about by the nervous system, and the chemical coordination is brought about the hormones. So there are hormones present both in plants and animals. In plants, the hormones are called phytohormones. Phyto term is used for the plants. So in these hormones, in these both the systems, they also work in integrated manner. What does the word integrated means? That is, they work together. That is, they are independent, not independent, they are dependent upon each other. So in fact, such a control and coordination system is very much required. Why is this required? For gathering information about changes in the external environment, that is if the plant or animal sense any change in the external environment, that is if the condition is very cold or very hot, then they start to show some movements. Then the transmitting this information to the internal cells located they are cells that are located away from the body surface. So for providing those cells the information, these systems are required. Then exchange of the information between the cells which are situated away from each other. So for carrying information from one cell to another, from one organ to another, from one tissue to another, this coordination is required. So we'll talk about the nervous system in plants. Except sponges, sponges are an exception. Except these, all the multicellular animals possess simple or complex nervous tissue. Sponges do not have any. Sponges are the only multicellular animals that do not have any nervous system. So in all the animals, nervous system is comprised of specialized cells. These cells are called neurons. I have taught you in the previous chapter also. So the nerve cells or the neurons, they respond to the stimuli and coordinate animal activities. So the nerve cells are the structural and functional units of the nervous system. So what is stimuli? We'll talk about that. So the stimuli, the whatever the changes in the environment to which the living organisms respond are called as stimuli. For example, the heat, cold, sound, smell, taste, touch, pressure, gravity, water, etc. All these include in the category of stimulus. So whenever we touch something very hot, we immediately remove our hand. That is because of the stimuli that is being transferred from our hand nerves to the brain. There is a direct connection between all the body organs to the brain. Therefore, we immediately remove our hand. So there are some people that have lost this connection, and therefore they are going through some mental disabilities. And that is the main problem. If the brain is not functioning properly, then you will not feel anything. The damage will be done, but you will not be able to acknowledge that change. So the living organism, they respond to stimuli in the form of body movements that I have told you. Now what is coordination? Then for a proper response to a stimulus, many organisms in the body, they work together. So whenever a stimulus is there, whenever any change is there in the external environment, there is always a response to it. So the working together of the various organs in an organism in order to produce a proper response to the stimulus is called as coordination. So whenever stimulus is there, there is always a response, and this combination of the response to the stimulus, this is called as coordination. So if the coordination is not there, then we'll not be able to remove our hand immediately after touching something very hot. Now in animals, the control and coordination is done by the nervous system and the endocrine system, and in plants, the control and coordination is done by the chemical substances called the plant hormones or the phytohormones. So let's start with the coordination in plants. So in animals, the control and coordination is done by the nervous and endocrine. Now what does the nervous system consist of? The nervous system consists of the brain, spinal cord and nerves. So the nervous system of human beings, it consists of the brain, and also what does brain comes under? So the main category is the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So as I told you, neuron is the structural functional unit of nervous system. It is also the longest cell that is found in the body. So when they unite, the neurons unite, they form the receptor and the effector organs with each other. So what is receptor and what is effector? So receptor are those sense organs which receive the stimuli, and whenever they receive any stimuli, any change, they pass this message to the brain or the spinal cord through the sensory nerves. So what are the sensory nerves? The photoreceptors that are present in the eyes to detect light. If there is very high intensity of light, then we'll blink our eyes. So this is a stimuli. The high light intensity is the stimuli, and to which the response is blinking. So this is what the work of a receptor. Then comes the phonoreceptors. Phono word is used for the ears. So in the ears, whenever we detect a very high intensity of sound, then we'll put our hands on the ears so that we can reduce the intensity of the sound, that is our response. So all this is coordination. Olfactory term is always used for the nose, and whenever we detect some foul smell, some not only foul smell, even we smell something very that is of high intensity, and it is from very near, even if it is very good, we'll have some response to it. So then gustatory comes for the tongue, and whenever we detect some taste, some good or bad taste, there is also a reaction to it. And tango receptors, these are the term used for the skin. Whenever something is touched on our skin, we respond to it. So this was the receptor. Now what are effectors? So effectors are the muscles and the glands which respond to the information from the brain and the spinal cord through the motor nerves. So now from the organ to the brain, this is done by the receptors, and effector is from the brain to the different organs. So it is vice versa. Now what are the sensory nerves? The nerves which carry information from the receptors, that is the sense organs, to the brain and spinal cord. These are the sensory nerves. Sensory nerves carries messages uh, uh, from the different sense organs, different body parts, to the brain. So to the brain, towards the brain, the sensory nerves, and away from the brain, that is the work of motor nerves. So motor nerves are the nerves which carry information from the brain, that is away from the brain, and towards the effectors, that is the muscles and glands. So now we will talk about these a little further. First, you see the diagram of the human nervous system. Maybe it is not very clear. So this is the the nervous system. Now the number of neurons are almost fixed for a particular species. So now what does a neuron consist of? Neuron is the smallest unit of nervous system. So first we'll talk about that. Each neuron consists of, maybe I've shown you in the last previous diagram, you can see it here. Neuron consists of a very small cell body. It is called as cyton, and there are number of branches. These are the nerve fibers. These are the branches. The nerve. This is cyton, the cell body. Then these are the fibers arising from the cyton. Now the neuron does not divide, and cyton contains a nucleus. This is a nucleus present in the center, and cytoplasm is present around the nucleus. And there are also some presence of Nissl granules that is not being shown here. Some dotted structures are present in the cytoplasm, and it is called as Nissl granules. These are the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Then there are also some fine thread-like structures that we call as the neurofibrils. So now we'll talk about the dendrite. So these are short and very much high in number, and branching is also very high. The branching high means these are divided, then again further these are divided. The branching is of very higher level. So that is, the dendrite are divisible into many parts. And they also contain some granules. They carry impulse towards the cyton. This is from in this direction, from the dendrites to the cyton. This is the direction of their impulse. Now axon, it is a large single and unbranched structure. It has not Nissl granules. It carries impulses from the cyton to the effector organs. The effector organs include the glands and the muscles. So from the cyton, it carries the information to the effector organs. It is a typical nerve fiber that consists of a central thin cytoplasm. Cylindrical axis is present, which is continuous, and it is called as the exoplasm. So whatever the cytoplasm present inside the axon, it is called as exoplasm. So now these are the myelin sheath. It is insulated, and it is mainly for the purpose of the control of the transmission of the signal towards directly to the brain, so that it do not get away from here and flow somewhere else. Therefore myelin sheath is for insulation purpose. Then in myelin sheath there is presence of some Schwann cells. The ending is called as the axon terminal. So we'll go back to the central nervous system. So the central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. The brain is covered by cranium. The outermost layer of the brain is called as cranium, and the spinal cord is covered by vertebral column. So this is the vertebral column. This is spinal cord. This is outside the vertebral column, and it is the cranium that is covering the brain. So both are surrounded by three membranes of the connective tissues, and these membranes are called as meninges. So meninges is the word term used for the governing of the brain and spinal cord. So outermost it is called as dura mater, middle called as arachnoid, and innermost pia mater. So the space between the membrane is filled with a fluid. So this space, it is filled with, inside this is some fluid is present that we call as the cerebrospinal fluid. And I told you, the wherever this fluid is present, the main function of it is for the protection. So this fluid, also the cerebrospinal fluid, protect the brain from any mechanical shocks. The brain can be differentiated into main three regions called the forebrain, midbrain, and the hindbrain. Now, what does the forebrain consist of? It consists of olfactory lobes, cerebrum, and diencephalon. What are olfactory lobes? These are a pair of small, solid cube-shaped bodies. They are fully covered by cerebrum. So, forebrain consists of olfactory lobes. Forebrain is the this part of the brain, the foremost part of the brain. It consists of olfactory lobes, and these are very small, and these are in pair, that is 2 in number. They are cup shaped like structures, and they are covered by the cerebrum. So they receive the impulse for smell. I told you the word olfactory is for nose, so they are receiving impulses for the smell. Then the cerebrum, it is a second part of the forebrain. It is the largest part of the brain, and it consists of two hemispheres. This hemispheres, the these are joined by a band of nerves called as corpus callosum. This is the corpus callosum, which is dividing the two parts of the brain, so the left and the right brain. Then comes the diencephalon. It encloses a cavity, a third, this is also called as third ventricle. It consists of thalamus and hypothalamus. So hypothalamus is present in the brain. It is controlling most of the glands in our body. And then comes the midbrain. Then this part forms the midbrain. It consists of two heavy fiber, the crura cerebri. The term for the heavy fiber is called as crura cerebri. So these tracts connect forebrain to the hindbrain. So in middle brain, there are some presence of some fibers that connect this part of the brain to this part of the brain, forebrain to the hindbrain, and that is present inside the middle brain called the crura cerebri, and it is for mainly controlling the eye movement and hearing responses. Then comes the hindbrain. It is consists of cerebellum. This is very large and well developed. It controls the coordination and adjustments of the movements and the posture. Then pons varolii, it is also a part of the hindbrain. It lies above the medulla oblongata. It controls some aspects of respiration. Then we'll talk about the spinal cord. The spinal cord, it lies in the vertebral column. It starts from the medulla oblongata. So medulla oblongata, it is ending in the hindbrain. So this is the part where medulla oblongata ends, and from here the spinal cord arises. It is also protected by three meninges, and cerebrospinal fluid is also present. It is also acts as center for spinal reflexes. Now we'll talk about the peripheral nervous system. So the peripheral nervous system includes cranial nerves and spinal nerves. So it mainly controls the voluntary activities of the body. I told you the difference between the voluntary and the involuntary. So voluntary are those activities which are under our control. Cranial nerves, also called as the cerebral nerves, they arise from the brain. There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves in man and 31 pairs of spinal nerves that arise from the spinal cord. Then comes the autonomic nervous system. So autonomic nervous system, it controls the involuntary activities of internal organs, that are not under our control, so such as hair, blood vessels, glands, and smooth muscles of the alimentary canal and uterus. Then it is further divided. The autonomic nervous system is further divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So organs, they receive nerves from both the sympathetic and parasympathetic nerve fibers. They have opposite effects on the organs. So I'll tell you what are the effects. Like if we talk about heart, so if sympathetic system and parasympathetic system both are working on the heart, then what will they do? On heart, the sympathetic nervous system, it functions to increase the heartbeat, and parasympathetic works to decrease the heartbeat. So they are working antagonistic. The word antagonistic is used when two things are working in opposite manner. Then if we talk about the eye, the sympathetic nervous system, it dilates the pupil, that is expands our pupil. The pupil is present in the eye. And parasympathetic nervous system, it constricts the pupil, that is it lessens the size of the pupil. So this is, they are working in opposite manner. So nerve cell we have already done. Okay, now we'll talk about the transmission of messages through the neurons. How these messages are being transferred from the effector organ, that is the body part or any body part, to the brain. So for example, this is a dendrites, the cell body, all this we have done. Whenever we receive impulse, these synapses are connecting the two, the junction where the two neurons meet is called as synapse. And whenever we receive any stimulus, this starts to go through the myelin sheath. This is the enclosed structure, that is the extension of the axon, and through this myelin sheath, the whatever the signal is there, it reaches towards the brain through the neurons. And this is how our brain reacts to that, and this is very much fast. Therefore immediately we'll remove our hand as we touch anything that is hot. The brain we have done, whatever the parts of the brain is there, you can see in the diagram the different parts of the brain: the parietal lobe, the occipital, cerebrum, the medulla oblongata, pons varolii. From here the spinal cord starts. Spinal cord also we have done, it carries different messages. Now we'll talk about the reflex action. This is a very important thing, very important chapter, a very important topic actually. How does it work? Then there are main two things: the receptors and the effectors. So the receptors, these are the sensory neurons, and effectors, the motor neurons. I told you what is the difference between the sensory and motor neurons, and they ultimately reach towards the spinal cord. So reflex action is the name given to the response which is at the level of spinal cord itself. So when the spinal cord is involved in transferring some message, then the reflex action is the term that is used. It is reflex action. So it is a rapid automatic response to a stimulus by an organ or a system of organs which does not involve the brain for its initiation. So when organ responds and the brain is not involved in the response, in the starting of that response or the initiation of that response, then only spinal cord is involved, and that action is called as reflex action. So reflex action is automatic and it is very rapid, that is very fast. So reflex action is an unconscious, that is without will, and involuntary response of the effectors to a stimulus. So again it is of two types: simple reflex and the conditioned reflex. Whenever we suddenly withdraw our hand if we touch a hot object, it is also a reflex action, that is not under our control. We'll do it immediately. If we'll not do it, we'll obviously get hurt. Then the simple reflex, it is inborn reflex or the inborn response to any stimulus. Whenever we are learning, so learning is a process which is involved in the conditional reflex. But if we talk about the simple reflex, we haven't learned that. It comes from our inside. We are not learning it in our life, but if we are even not learning it, we'll have the response towards it, that is innate, that is already present in our body. So these are mostly protective in function. For example, knee jerk, that is occurred immediately when the patella tendon of the leg is sharply tapped. So a quick closing of the eyelid occurs when an object suddenly comes in front of our eyes. So this is not in our control. We'll immediately close our eyes whenever something is there in front of our eyes. This is innate. So now we'll talk about the conditioned reflex. These are not inborn, they are acquired by experience, training and learning. And like for example, learning of cycling or driving of a scooter, etc. These are all involved and comes under the conditioned reflex. So the reflex arc is a very important thing that we'll talk in the next class. For today, this much is enough. Thank you, class.